So welcome everyone to 7134 EDN, Making Sense of Education and New Technologies for 2017. So we have a number of students in the course, about a dozen, but not everyone will want to actually participate in these online sessions, and that's perfectly fine. Some students prefer to work through the course material on their own. But these sessions are primarily a chance for you to actually ask questions and to engage in discussion about the readings and the concepts that are being presented during the course. And they will be recorded, and you'll be able to access these and review them, or if you're not participating in them, use them as a means of finding out information beyond what's presented in the course material.
Yep.
So we have with us Rebecca, Sarah, and Yuan. So Juan, what's
Eric.
your...
You
Eric.
can call me Eric. Yes, I prefer this.
Thanks, Eric. So Rebecca, Sarah, and Eric, and others may join us during the evening if they get a chance to. So this is really an introductory week, and there's a number of things in the course material for us to have a look at. I'll go through the assessment tasks and how the course is structured, and then we'll look at the course content website, which I know some of you have had a chance to put your introductions in, and then we'll discuss some of the readings. And this week our focus of the readings is on educational technology research. Most of this course is not focused too strongly on research, but because this is a master's level course, it is expected that you engage to a certain extent with the research process. And we're going to use a particular research process in this course known as consensus research, and particular technique called the Delfy survey or the Delfy process that is used to develop consensus around concepts and ideas. And we'll go through a process by which you will explore how to improve an educational environment. And that may be your own classroom, or it might be a school that you're involved in, or you may be involved at a governmental level or policy level, looking after the development of an entire country in terms of directions to do with educational technologies and how they impact upon education. So it really depends upon what level you're at. Most people in this course, from the introductions I've seen so far, are more towards the classroom teaching end of the spectrum, and that's perfectly fine, and we can adjust things as needed to meet your particular needs. But we'll have those discussions as we go. And for those watching along on the video, please complete your introductions so that I've got an understanding of where you're at in terms of the course and what sort of material to pitch to your level and what you want to get out of the course. It's no good preparing you all to be policymakers that change your education systems in particular countries when you're more focused on what you want to do in your own classroom or changing the actual school environment to make the use of educational technology more supported.
Yeah.
So any questions before we get into the material about the course itself?
No.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start sharing my screen a bit so we can have a look at some of the course pages. Now, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, so this is the course content page. Now you can get to that off, whoops, where's Learning at Griffith? Oh, sorry, this is the Learning at Griffith page. And here you'll find our announcements. Each week I'll have a weekly announcement. I'll also generally do a small announcement after each Hangout session, just summarizing what was done and some of the things that were raised during that session, and any particular announcements that need to be made, particularly around assessment and things of that nature. So on the left here, this is the course homepage. Your course profile, we'll have a look at it in a second. The course content website, which takes you out to the WordPress site, which I'll talk about in a second. My contact information, and a few other things that you won't see on yours. So in the course profile, the main aspect here is, of course, around your assessment. That's what you're most interested in. There is a section also on learning activities that are important. and you'll see that the course is broken up into 4 modules. Each module generally has about 3 sessions, and you've got particular readings that relate to each of those modules. The first 3 weeks, we focus around what's called educational futures and looking where the future of education might be going, in particular related to educational technology. And we'll start exploring what we mean by this concept of a Delfy study. Then we have 3 weeks looking at actual classroom technologies or technologies that can be used in schools and educational environments. And there's a whole range of different ICTs or technologies that are being used in schools. And we'll explore a whole range of those. Then we go into the next sort of part of the course where we start looking at how to make a change with these technologies and the pedagogies associated with that. So how we can actually make changes to an organization through the use of various new technologies and pedagogies that are associated with those technologies. And then finally, we'll look at how we can influence change in an organization, how we can build an actual change process to transform an organization. It might be your classroom, it might be your school, it might be your whole district, or it might be the whole country. The same basic models apply, and we'll look at that, and your final assessment will be around creating a plan to enact such change. Any questions on that structure before we get into the assessment?
Where do we find that? Sorry.
Okay, this is in the course profile.
Okay.
Which you'll find off the Learning at Griffith website. So here on the course profile,
Yeah.
it'll take you into here, and each course profile has a learning activities, which describes the content of the course and how it's structured.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And then the next bit we'll be looking at is the assessment plan. They're the 2 main things you need to be sort of particularly familiar with. The aims and outcomes are important as well, but most students really want to know about what they're going to be learning and how they're going to be assessed. So there's 3 sorts of assessment. Now the first one is what we call a log of learning activities. Now this is 20%, and it's simply based on participation. So you do the activities and you receive some marks. And so completing that introductory web page form gets you 5% for the course. Or sorry, yeah, 5% for the course. And then doing the Delfy survey, the in-class Delfy survey will get you 6.5%. Participating to online discussions will get you some marks. Attending these weekly video conferences can get you some marks. Reviewing the videos can get you marks. Doing the readings can get you marks. And doing the quizzes can get you marks. And you'll probably notice that all of those possible marks add up to much more than 20%. So you don't have to do them all. And most students can just get sufficient marks by just doing the readings and watching the videos and doing the quizzes. Okay, so it's really, there's 20% for doing the activities. You don't have to do them well. You're not being judged on how well you do them. You simply have to complete a number of activities in the course and show active participation. So any questions about that aspect? Generally, it's 20 easy marks. Okay, and unless you're totally absent and disengaged from the course, it's almost impossible not to get those marks. Okay, so then we have 2 other more formal assessment tasks, each worth 40%. The first of which is your Delfy study. This is due on the 21st of August, and it involves doing a small research study where you have to find 10 people, ideally 10 experts, but I understand that can be very difficult if you're not involved with a lot of those sort of people. It could be just 10 friends, ideally if they could have some relationship to education. Of course, everyone's had some relationship to education. Everyone's been to school, just about everyone. So as long as you've got 10 people that can participate and fill in a survey that you'll have them complete. They'll do actual 2 rounds of that survey, and the idea is to have them build a consensus on where they think education is going in terms of technology. There'll be a number of other aspects in there that we're going to go through over the next few weeks. You're going to do a little bit of a systems analysis and build a systems model of your particular organization. You'll identify the challenges facing that organization. You'll come up with some questions that'll be answered by your experts, and then you'll get their consensus on the answers to those questions. And then you'll construct 2 scenarios, each of 600 words, describing what your organization might be like in the future if certain things happen, such as using, say, if you were going to go to a one-to-one laptop school or classroom. How might your organization change? How might the classroom change if you had that equipment and everyone was using it and doing things with that technology? So you've got a fair idea of what's involved in that first task. We'll discuss it more each week.
Yeah.
But it's reasonably straightforward. And there's a whole series of steps that you'll work through to complete the task.
Yep.
Okay, then we have the second task, or sorry, the final task, the third task actually, which is your implementation plan. And this is due at the end of the course, or just before the end of the course, on the 15th of September. And here you're going to come up with a 3,000-word plan of how to change your organization so that it can achieve the sorts of things that you identified in that Delfy study. So you might decide that you want to have a wonderful school that's all using lots of iPads and doing ebooks and creating a whole system around that. But you've got to then go through a process of how to actually achieve that. And you're going to learn about those processes during this course, and then you're going to articulate them for your particular organization in a planning document. Okay, so there's a whole range of things in there. You'll come up with an educational vision for your organization, identify all the stakeholders, analyze all the systems involved, and then work out the changes that are required. Look at how that organization will be in 1, 5, and 10 years, and then a whole series of strategies for achieving those actions to make what you want to have happen come about. Okay. So do we have any questions about that aspect of the course so far? The structure of the course or your 3 elements of assessment?
No. All good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
Now, I will be setting up a discussion forum for you to ask questions of during the course, or of course you can email me. We're a fairly small group, but it's better if we can do things through the discussion forum, because then everyone can see the questions and the answers that are presented about those.
Sorry, Jason, I have one question about the survey. Do we need to design a survey, or we just use a kind of a survey form, the same survey form to finish?
No, you'll be using a particular piece of software that I'll be introducing you to, and it will generate the surveys automatically. You'll just put in, you'll design the survey or the questions. You'll put in the email addresses of the people that are going to be involved, and there'll be a whole range of things that they'll answer online.
Okay.
What we'll be using is a new technique called pairing, where the idea is that it'll present 2 options to the participants, and they'll choose which option they prefer. And it'll present a whole series of those pairs, and by then using some calculations, it'll then develop a consensus based upon the participants making choices between 2 options, which is much easier for them to do than ranking a whole series of questions or options. But we'll discuss those things a little bit later when we get to the readings, and talk about Delfy surveys and some of the other consensus research methods that we can use.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, let's pop back then if there's no other questions about the course itself. So in addition to the Griffith website, if you click on the content website link on the Learning at Griffith page, you'll come to the course content website. Now here, the reason I use this is because unlike the Learning at Griffith page, this can track your completion of activities. And because I give you 20% for completing activities, I need a way of tracking your progress. Now, mine are all ticks because I've completed everything, but yours won't show all ticks. It'll show you which things you've completed and which things you haven't completed.
Okay.
Now, for those if you come to this for the first time, I'll just log out and show you. When you first come to this page, okay, it'll look like this. And in order for you to be able to participate and engage, you need to click on the login button.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hopefully this won't do it automatically for me. And if you haven't created an account yet, you need to click on then register. I know a few of you guys have done this already, but just in case others are watching this on the video, if you click on register, there'll then be a series of questions you need to fill in, like most websites. And often it's quicker than this, but that's the way things go. There we go. So you need to put in a username and an email, click on register. It'll send a email to your whatever email address you've put in there, and you'll need to confirm that, and then you'll be able to log into the website. So I'll just log back in here. Okay, and in the website then, you just go down into each of the sections. The first activity is for you to fill in a little introduction form, which then generates the, oops, won't see it on that page. It just asks you a series of questions and generates these little snippets for people to then know who you are, and gives me an overview of your interests so I can tailor the course to meet your particular desires in what you want to learn about. But beyond that, each week you'll go into the various sections. The first of which is on educational technology research. And here I present the readings for the week.
Mm-hmm.
And this week we have 3 readings: multidisciplinary methods in educational technology, quantitative research on educational technology, and the Delfy technique in educational research. When you've done those done those questions, there'll be a button down here for you to click to say that you've completed it, and some quizzes that you can do. And then you can go on to the next unit. Please make sure you do the quizzes, because that can also get you marks, and it gives you an idea of whether or not you've understood the material. It doesn't matter in terms of your grade how well you do on the quizzes. You do have to get 80% to move on, but you can do the quiz as many times as you want. So it's almost impossible not to get 80% eventually. Does anyone have any questions about those aspects?
No.
Okay, the quizzes are fairly short. I think they're about 20 questions long, and they're just based on the readings or the material that you've been looking at that week. Okay, so from your perspective, is this course what you thought it would be?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Because your website of the course content is very cool.
Yeah.
It is just like a kind of a very unique technology.
It is, but these things date fairly quickly. There's lots of technology that we're going to be learning about during this course around learning management systems. And this is actually an example of a learning management system, that the WordPress site that you're using.
Yeah.
And we'll look at a whole range of those. Some of them are more powerful and effective, but they involve more of a registration process. I wanted to use this one because it's a fairly simple and quick and easy registration process. Because students don't like going through complicated processes, because things can go wrong and you then get frustrated and you don't enjoy the process. So we do try to keep things simple. We will be looking at some ebooks next week. Yes, or the week after. At some stage, we're going to be looking at some iBooks and some other materials. And throughout this course, we'll try and introduce as much new use of educational technology as we can. Not as much as we'll be exploring in theory. Because this is a remote course, I don't do particularly experimental things as I might do a face-to-face class, for example, because if things go wrong in an online environment, it's a bit harder to fix them immediately. So we do have to be a little bit cautious. As we saw a little bit tonight with the Hangouts, Google had changed the way that Hangouts work with Griffith University's internal use of Google tools, and the approach of just putting things into your calendars wasn't going to work. So we had to revert back to another approach. This is actually being done through YouTube, where YouTube has the ability to do Hangouts and broadcast those live. Okay, but Rebecca, how does the course relate to what you thought it might be?
I think it's pretty good. It's what I was reading today is a lot of theory.
Yes.
And I liked the second reading. I think it was the Luo. I might have said that wrong, but I liked how it spoke about like the different, like the philosophical things behind it, and like the think I was reading, is it pragmatism?
Yep.
Yeah, I liked reading about that kind of stuff.
Oh, good. So we'll get into the readings in a second, and explore those in a bit more detail. This week is a little bit theoretical. In future weeks, there'll be some more applied things for you to do, particularly next week with systems thinking. And there'll be, unfortunately, at a master's level, we do quite a lot of theory, because you are sort of expected
those
to.
in other courses,
you are expected to get to that sort of stage now in a master's course. We still have a fair bit of practical stuff in the second module where we look at a whole lot of educational technologies. And in the third and fourth modules, while there is still a fair bit of theory that has to support your ideas, it is quite practically orientated around you coming up with an action plan for your school or your classroom or your institution. So we hopefully have a bit of a balance there, but I do understand there is a lot of theory compared to undergraduate courses and so forth, but that's the nature of masters.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, my school doesn't have a lot of technology available.
Yep.
And pretty much we don't have computers in the classroom and things like that.
Well, that's where in this course, we allow you to envisage what things might be.
Yeah.
So you're not constrained by the practicalities. You can say that you want to have a vision of where everyone's got computers. And even though it may not be practically possible at the moment for your classroom, it doesn't mean you can't imagine and think through what might be achievable if those things do come about. And as we'll see in the implementation plans then, there's a whole range of strategies to try to get people on board with that vision and try to enact it and make it into an actuality. So don't worry at all if you don't have that at the moment. And the same as if you don't have a classroom, we've got a number of international students in the course that aren't teaching themselves just at the moment in any sort of environment. You can make up your own environment. You can pretend that you're the Minister of Education for your country, or the principal of your school, or just a classroom teacher, or if you're not involved in K-12 education, you could do it around a university level or an English language course level, a whole range of options that are possible. So don't feel constrained by any particular context. Just let me know and we can frame things to suit what you need to learn about for your own particular interests and career paths and so forth.
Yep.
Okay then, well, let's get into the readings. So our first reading, where is it? On multidisciplinary methods in educational technology, research and development by Randolph. Okay, so who wants to give me a summary of what this was all about? Who's going to be brave?
Sorry, I have to recall this material. I have to click it in.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know if I can give a summary, but I have a question.
Yep.
I can't pronounce it really good. Empirical information. It's like
was it empirical?
Yeah, probably. I just wasn't sure what it was exactly.
Okay. Let me just find where it's referring to that. Was that the section where?
It was.
This is.
I've got something
clarify
here. I've
the
got
dialogue.
something written down here.
Randolph helps clarify the dialogue that by theoretically and empirically charting the research methods.
Yeah, but it also comes up in another spot as well. I just wasn't sure exactly what it was.
Okay.
I've got here like to produce theoretical and that word information. I'm just saying what like the development and research project was that he had done.
Yep. So empirically, fundamentally, it's having statistical evidence to support the assertions and what's being presented. So it's not just pure thought processes. There's actually been quantitative, or it could also be qualitative, but there's actually been studies that support the assertions that are being presented. And in the case where it's saying empirically charting, generally those assertions have got some sort of statistics behind them, and we can then show that and explain what's being presented by pointing to actual figures related to the research.
Okay.
Okay, so it's, yeah, it just means that there's, in the main, numerical evidence to support what's being put forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so there's four main aspects. The methodological factors, these are the ways that the research is done. The types of research questions, the technologies that are involved in the research. Of course, remember here, we're not talking about all forms of educational research. We're talking about educational technology research. So this is to do with research around the impact or the effects of the use of technology in education. And then generally how the research can be improved. Of course, all research can be improved by various methods and processes. And they're the sort of the four aspects that are looked at in this particular study. So you'll find generally when you're asked for a study, for a summary, there'll normally be an abstract or a summary at the beginning of any academic work. And that's what this sort of section represents. It's a summary of what the whole paper is about. And formally in academic papers, we call them an abstract. In books and so forth, there may be an introductory chapter, but they provide you with a summary of the entire work that you're going to be looking at. So then we often jump to the chapter headings or the table of contents, which gives a framework of the whole paper. So here, they're looking at the methodological factors again. So these are the different ways we can go about doing educational technology research. the different types of research that these are broken into. A metasynthesis is where you look at a whole lot of research that's been done, and you don't do your own research, but you, by the fact that you're looking at lots of other people's research, you develop a synthesis of what they are all saying, and you develop a sort of a consensus of what the overall field is exploring in terms of that research topic, or in this case, the educational technologies. Different ways of collecting data and different ways of analysing that data. The ways then we have of reporting that through research papers or journal papers or magazine articles, and then a few little conclusions that the author has made. So here is a particular table that the authors come up with around the whole process of educational technology and some of the aspects related to that. We might come back to that a little bit later. Okay. We've talked about all that. Jumping down to the actual meat of the paper. Okay, the different methodologies. So have you all done some subjects related to research?
Yeah.
Okay, how about the other? I can't see if you're nodding, so you have to say something.
Yeah.
Understanding research and the introduction to research.
Oh, good. So you've all done a little bit of research.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just need to pop back for 1 second because we've got someone wanting to join us, and I just need to send out those invitations again.
Yep.
There we go. Okay, so you'll be familiar then, research involves a research problem. Okay, you have to have something that you want to research. And what most research, or all researchers will then do, is look at how other people have tried to find out solutions to that problem in the past. And formally we call that a literature review, where you go through a process of identifying how other people have researched what you're trying to research and what they found out and how that may help inform what you're going to be researching. Then, of course, you need to choose a particular way of doing that research and come up with what we call a method and a methodology that frames the theory behind how you're doing that research. Okay, but I don't want to make this into a course on research methods, because you've done those in other processes. Okay, do we have any questions? I don't want to spend this whole time just going through the paper for you again. Do you have any particular questions about any sections in the paper that were confusing or you're unsure about?
No.
Okay, so how about from your perspective, what are some questions related to educational technology research that we might want to answer?
Can technology improve students' learning?
Good. Yes, that's certainly a very popular question. And we often have new technologies emerge. So what's been some new technologies in recent years that we might like to find out about how they improve student learning? Well, maybe even let's start with brainstorming. What are some educational technologies? What are some technologies that we use in education?
Multimedia.
Yes, multimedia.
The internet.
The internet, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What else?
Online discussion.
Good, yes, online discussions.
Yeah.
And we might even include also
Education blogs.
Distant classes.
So what was that, Sarah?
Education blogs.
Yes, good, blogs.
Yeah, and like school they using Facebook, such as Facebook to or
Yes, absolutely.
to manage their class schedules like that.
Mm-hmm. What other ones? What about sort of some more physical ones?
Physical ones. Traditional classes with no, it's not that.
Let's say things like interactive whiteboards or iPads, tablet computers.
Yes, with educational software inside.
Yes, educational software. Okay, so there's a whole lot of technologies that have emerged and are still emerging, and in a couple of weeks' time, we'll explore a whole range of those in quite a lot of detail. So what are some things we might want to learn about then? So let's say classroom blogs. What are some things that we might research relating to classroom blogs? There is that aspect we've talked about, whether or not they help student learning. So there's that aspect. Is there anything else we might want to explore around that particular educational technology?
Can you give us a hint about that?
Okay, so well, we might want to see if students like using them. We might want to then look at whether or not it helps them with their interactions with other students in terms of their social interactions. Other things we might want to explore is their identity formation as they develop for adolescents, in terms of their development of their identity and who they feel they are and how they present themselves to others. Of course, online blogs can be a different way of presenting themselves than face-to-face in a classroom environment.
Yeah.
Okay, so there'll be a whole range of different questions we might explore that we need to understand more about that particular technology and how it influences things. There might be the whole aspect of, say, fake news, and the ability to create their own blogs means that they can also create their own news or their own information, and whether or not that information is correct or not, and how to actually understand whether or not it is correct, and the processes around that aspect of digital literacies.
Yeah.
Okay, so for any technology, there could be a whole range of things that we might want to research and explore about. Okay, so let's pop back to the reading then. Okay, so generally we want to find out questions that are help us understand whether or not that new technology should be introduced into schools or into educational environments. There'll also be a whole lot of other questions around who gains benefit from doing that. Say, for example, putting in a learning management system. It may not particularly benefit the students in terms of their learning, but it may help manage the organization more effectively. So it may make it, say, we may not use as much paper, or it may help us keep track of students' progress more easily, or help us introduce anti-plagiarism software so that we can check to see whether or not students are cheating. So there can be a whole range of other things that are important outcomes of the introduction of that technology that may not directly relate to students' learning, but have other, that support other stakeholders in that particular organization. And then there may just be questions that are important for the research community. We may want to understand the learning processes or how an organization goes about introducing new technologies. So it may not be particularly of interest to that school or organization, but for a wider academic study, it may be helpful. Okay, so there's a range of purposes for educational technology research. And there's quite a big diagram there that you can go through to have a look at some of those aspects. Let's jump down to, okay. So previous research, as I mentioned before, is we commonly refer to that as a literature review, but it's looking at the established understanding of that area. What do we already know about the use of blogs? And that may go back many years before the actual educational technology. Students have been writing diaries for a long time. And a diary is another form of blog. Blogs have certain differences because they can be put online and shared more easily, but students in the past have been able to share their diaries or their reflective writing, and they have a similar relationship. So the research that has been done 30, 40, 50 years ago around students' reflective writing and diary keeping could still be useful in understanding what's happening in a digital environment with online blogs. Okay, so what have we got here? So there's 5 main categories of educational technology research questions. Okay, researchers love to categorize things and put things into different pigeonholes. And here we have, this researcher has come up with 5 different types of educational technology research. The proto-theories, okay, so these are theories about how people actually learn. The interactions of what happens when we introduce a new technology into a educational environment and how it changes that environment. Interventions that cause the desired outcome is normally in an educational environment, how that technology improves student learning. And development of questions that deal with how an intervention can be improved. So sometimes we might want to look at, okay, let's say we're introducing one-to-one laptops. We study a whole range of schools that introduce one-to-one laptops. Some things work, some things don't work, and we can develop ideas about how another school, if they were going to introduce that technology, might be able to do it without making the mistakes of the previous schools. Okay, so there's a set of different approaches to how we can, and pretty much all of educational technology research fits into those areas. The only one extra that I would add into that would be there's a growing body of educational technology research around the negative aspects of educational technology, and looking at how educational technology can sometimes get very hyped and become a self-fulfilling process. And we need to be a little bit more critical around how we engage with educational technology. Of course, all technologies have a whole lot of stakeholders, and particularly educational technologies where they are being supported by large industries, such as the Microsoft or Google or Apple, but also companies that are producing whiteboards and a whole lot of other stuff. They want research that supports the introduction of that technology. And sometimes we don't always look at the whole process of why educational technologies are so popular in schools. And yeah, there's a whole area of research around that as well, which doesn't quite fit into the 4 aspects described here. Okay, lots of different questions that can be asked around the use of educational technology. These are sort of a summary of all the different ones done, and this is what's called a meta-analysis. Okay, this is looking at a whole lot of studies and the sorts of questions that those studies were trying to answer. So stakeholder attitudes would be things like, did the students enjoy using that technology? Did the teachers enjoy using it? Did it help teachers with their process and so forth? Did it improve enrollments in courses? Did it make students more likely to do the courses where those educational technologies were being used? Did it help them with their learning? How did teaching practices change when those technologies were introduced? Okay, so these are sorts of questions that were done, and the main ones were the top 3. Sometimes people look at things to do with gender and range of other aspects, but less commonly. And again, a number of different categories about the sorts of questions that are asked. Remembering you're going to be coming up with your own set of questions for your Delfy survey at some point, and you may want to look back at these and sort of help you with coming up with your own questions. Okay, let's get a move on so we don't run out of time. Okay, this is looking into the methodology aspect a little bit more. Going to jump down to the other sections. Okay, so then we have a range of different types of research. Now, you hopefully would have learnt about the two main categories of research, quantitative and qualitative. Are those terms familiar?
Yep.
Good. Under quantitative, we have four main approaches, the main one being experimental research. We also, as part of that, have what's called quasi-experimental research. But then we have correlation research, causal comparative research, and survey research. And the approaches that you'll be learning about in this course really relate to those first three, which use a little bit of each of those, where we're going to use some tools that help analyze the responses that your experts provide and come up with some conclusions based upon their choices. But that's a quantitative approach. Qualitative approaches are a little bit different. The main one being case studies, but we also have narrative research, phenomenological research, ethnographic research, and grounded theory. And you hopefully would have heard some of those terms before. But again, this isn't a course in research methods, so we're just going through these fairly briefly as a summary. But all of these are used in educational technology research as well. There is one I haven't mentioned. Does anyone know the third main category of research? We've got qualitative and quantitative, and there's another one.
Mixed.
Very good. Yes, mixed methods. Probably the one that's done worst because people think it's just you can do whatever you want. But essentially for mixed method research, you choose a quantitative approach and a qualitative approach, and you work out how they can work together and how they can complement and provide more than what either of them could do individually. Quite a difficult thing to do properly. And a lot of people think it's just a really easy way of not having to work out what methodology you're going to use. But done well, it can be beneficial. But done poorly, it's really just partially doing two other methodologies or a whole mix of methodologies without even defining which ones they want to use. Surveys are probably very familiar to you, quite easy to do. You do up a survey, collect a whole lot of data, and there's various tools and we can use to analyze that data. And we can get some good quantitative results from that if we have sufficient data. There are some limitations on that. To do it really well, it should be done in an experimental process whereby it's done through multiple groups. Some
停了。
对啊，
看看，就俩人上课，就我们俩人上课，还课还没上完呢。这课上从7点上到9点，2个小时啊。
好像是那个正在录制吧，这个课。
你可不可以把摄像头关一下？
没有，现在还在上课呢。
那什么时候结束啊？
到9点。
哇！
到9点，本来是从6点钟开始。
Hello。
哎，那这个怎么办？
怎么会突然停了呢？
我不知道啊。那我们是不是要怎么样要停掉吗？还是咋回事？因为老师那儿已经没有了。但是现在是我们俩在说话。
对啊，那我们这段是不是还是在录音啊？还是在录制阶段？
应该没有吧？因为他那都停了嘛。
那我们是不是应该退出，然后再重新进啊？
应该吧。
我们试一下。
要不等一会儿先给他，我先给他发个信，等会儿。
行行，你先问他一下吧。
对对对。
OK。哇，这课好难，我觉得。
他要求的很多，
啊，各
还要
种
要求很多东西，还要参与，还要写那个 quiz，还要做 quiz。
那个什么，那个叫 Dolphin 那个什么东西啊？就是他说要 August 30那天交的。
你说是哪一个？
就是他强调说，需要我们找10个人，10个专家。
那个不是，那个就找10个人就行了。那个就他说，如果是找什么专家就太难了。
哦，找10个人做什么呀？
做一个 survey 嘛。哎，等会儿啊，他来信了。啊，不是不是，就做个 survey。但是他说那个 survey 好像是从他那个一个那个发那个从系统里面，从机器里面让人家做，就是我们之前做那种 research， 你知道吧？他有那种 survey 吗？
什么主题啊？
主题我等会儿还没看呢。他好像是说是什么学校、什么大学呀、小学呀那样子，给你自己弄一个，自己找个那种什么 environment。那个是第几个作业来着？我都忘了。不过他这个要求特别多，光看他那个就是那个 assignment， 他都有各个要每一个部分要写多少字的。
哦，Delfy Study 是到8月21
来了
号交。
对，他进来了，老师进来了。
Okay, I see I dropped out there at some point.
Yeah. So,
my apologies. Can you tell me when I dropped out?
We just thought, where is the lecture? Where is Jason?
My apologies there. What did I get up to? Well, how long was I missing?
It's just
5 minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh well, had a very nice talk I was going on there, but no one was listening. Okay. So I'd been going through looking at the different aspects of that reading and the various elements of that. Okay, let me just get that back for you. And do you have any questions while I'm getting this ready again about that reading?
No. No.
Okay. Well, let's pop back to it then, and we'll see if we can pick up. Had we gone through the different categories
of
research?
Yes. I think we just you talked about the mixed method, just like
Yeah.
Okay. Just finished there at mixed methods.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll pop back there and we'll go through that again. Okay, so we looked at those things.
Survey research. Yeah.
Okay, so we covered most of that then. It was more, I think I just was elaborating on these various elements, but you can read that and it's probably not that important. course, in this course, we're just going to be focusing on quite a simple methodology around consensus research and using the Delfy process. So, while this is important if you want to go on and become a researcher, less so if you don't. Okay, let me just jump down. Okay, so one of the big aspects of educational technology research is you need to collect data. And one of the great things about technology is it's made it much easier, particularly the internet. And we're going to be using a particular tool called 1000 Minds that allows us to set everything up, send out a whole lot of emails to our participants, and then they just complete some online forms to gather the data for us. Online surveys are also very popular nowadays. So there's a whole lot of tools that we've got that can make collecting data far easier than it used to be. And probably the main thing is, once we have that data, it's already inputted. We don't have to go through the whole process of putting all that data into tables and databases and then analyzing that. We can just go straight into our analysis using a whole lot of, again, technology tools. And particularly for the statistical quantitative stuff, these help us a lot, and we don't have to know a whole lot of mathematics. The tools can be used to assist us. It does, of course, help if you know a bit of mathematics. Of course, you can then see if the tools are working correctly, and you still have to sort of not make mistakes with that, but far easier than it used to be. As we'll see when we do that in this course. But obviously, you're familiar with the whole idea of surveys. Here's an example of a teddy bear with a camera in it that's being used to have a student answer questions to try to remove the impact of having a person ask questions. Because sometimes students will respond in different ways depending upon your body language or how you ask a question or your expression in terms of response to a question. And this was an approach used to try to reduce that while still being engaging to a student. So a student's not just looking at a microphone, they're looking at sort of a teddy bear and answering questions from that.
Interesting.
Log files are another one. Tests are a common one in schools where we give students tests and then we analyze the results of those tests. And we've got our NAPLAN tests and a whole lot of other things like that where we collect lots of data nationally about student progress. But at some point then you have to analyze that data. You've got a whole lot of either quantitative data or qualitative data or mixes of those, and you have to go through a process of understanding what that data means. Now, quantitative is a bit easier because there's some very specific, well-established ways of looking at the data and determining meaning from that data. Qualitative is a little bit more open, and it allows us to engage with the data in different ways. But generally, for qualitative, there's some process of coding the data, identifying some elements of that data, categorizing it, some aspects that we want to actually draw from the data. And there's various techniques that can be used to assist in that. And this is just going through some of those approaches. But there's many, many different methods, and you'll be able to choose ones that you relate to. In this course, though, you're going to have some very specific ones that I'm going to be providing you related to the tools that we're going to use. Okay, so that's data analysis. What's the final step?
Analysis?
Not quite. After analysis?
Report.
Reporting.
Yes, reporting on the research. Once you actually have done your analysis, you need to actually share what you found with others. And the main way we do that in in research is through journals. There's a whole lot of magazines where academics share their research and others read them and learn from those findings. We can also share through conferences and workshops and other approaches like that, or writing a book. So there's other ways of sharing research, but the main approach is to publish in a journal. And then we have ways of verifying whether or not that is a good piece of research. And we have a system called peer review, where you submit your article to a journal, and then a number of other academics will look at that article and determine whether or not it is suitable for publication. Of course, lots of academics write lots of work, and some of it's good, but not all of it is good. And we have a process so that, unlike things such as fake news, once upon a time we used to have lots of editors in our news agencies, like our newspapers and our television news reporting, and they would go through a long process of making sure anything they reported was absolutely correct, and they would be horrified if they reported something that was incorrect. But over time, we've got less and less of those editorial processes, and we get things slipping through into our news reports that turn out to be false. Now, in academia, that's a really bad thing, because people might base a whole lot of conclusions and implement a whole lot of processes based upon incorrect material being presented as good research. So we have a quality filtering system through peer research or peer review, where other expert academics look at your work before it's published and say whether or not it is of an appropriate standard to be published. And the main things they look at are your research methods, how you went about doing the research, whether or not you applied a well-accepted approach, whether or not your conclusions relate to and are drawn from the method that you presented that you used, and whether or not they are an appropriate conclusion to make based upon what you discovered in your research. Because sometimes people want to have good results, and sometimes they present what has occurred in the research and the outcomes of the research more highly than they should. And that's what the peer review process is aimed at stopping occurring. Okay, so that's sort of a summary from this particular article of educational technology research, or really more just education research as a whole, and to a certain extent, research as a whole. So have either of you done any research yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
What have you done so far?
It's about the mainstream teachers' attitude about the ESL students in the mainstream classroom.
Oh, good. And did you use a particular method or methodology?
Used quantitative and qualitative method.
And did you draw that from a survey?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
First survey and then qualitative method. Yeah, just use that.
And how about you, Sarah?
Yeah. I did the qualitative research last semester. It was an interview. Like I interviewed an international student regarding how Facebook can help international students to have better cultural adjustment, and maybe can help them to improve their learning learning outcome. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, good.
It was an interview, so yeah, it's only one person, so it may have its own shortage, but yeah.
Yes.
20 minutes interview, I think I can still find something from international students.
I understand,
yeah,
oh, so it's good.
Yeah.
So both of you have had some experience of doing some research and some aspects of educational technology research, which is even better. Okay.
Yep.
Well, let's jump ahead then now to the next article. Do you have any questions on it before we jump into it? This is the article by Lu on qualitative research on educational technology, philosophies, methods, and challenges. So this is getting much more into the qualitative approach to educational technology research. And qualitative research is probably the most common approach used in education research. It has its limitations, but because of the complexity of education, it is the more commonly used approach. So here we have the nice abstract, which gives us a summary of the paper. And this looks at educational technology research through 3 particular approaches. Quite strange words that you may not have come across before: ontology, epistemology, and methodology. And we'll have a look at those in a second. Okay, so let's get down. So who wants to give me a definition of what ontology is?
Ontology.
What is that?
Ontology is about something has been existing for a long time and study it and prove it, just like that.
Yep. So it's really getting into the philosophical aspects of what we're looking at and how we actually view the world. So whether or not you've got a view that's objective or a realist view is the first sort of dichotomy that is explored. And these sort of things do help us understand. They influence the way we go about doing our research. If you believe that there are actual truths out there that you can actually find, that's one particular way of looking at the world. Other people, though, don't look at the world that way. They don't believe that there's any truths. They think that we create truths ourselves, and there could be a whole range of possible truths, that they're not that there's no one actual truth out there. And there's a whole range of things such as objectivism, realism, idealism, rationalism, relativism, and pragmatism. And they're all different ways of understanding the world, and they influence how we actually explore topics. So it's useful to help have an understanding of that. The methods you choose generally are related to your ontology. And you don't normally describe your ontology and so forth. It's things that actually influence your philosophical perspective. So if you believe that reality exists in terms of properties and relationships between various entities, then you're an objectivist or realist. If you believe that your mind shapes the world and your perceptions of it, and that reality is really just created by your mind, then that's more of an idealist and rationalist perspective. Relativists believe in an absolute truth, and this is often related to religious sort of aspects, where they believe in an absolute existence of truth, and that things are either true or not true, or good or bad, and things of that nature. Pragmatists believe that truth and reality is always changing, and that we can have a bit of influence on that change, but it could be different tomorrow than it is today. So measuring it and identifying the absolute truth today may not help us that much, because it could change in the future. So they're the main sort of ones. They affect our epistemology, which is our understanding of how we learn and what learning is.
又断了，老师又要自己上课了。我刚刚给他发微信，让他停住。
不是，他要是停的话，他要是出去的话，他应该知道他自己出去了吧？
他没有看，他就在自己讲的，他没有看我们的节目。 我刚让他发个信，他停住了。
你给他写邮件了吗？
我刚就发了邮件通知他了，他才给停住的。然后再给他发一个。我这个课就这样2个人上，好尴尬啊。
对啊，刚才不还有个 Rebecca 吗？
他说他跟老师说他会中间走掉啊，结果走了也不带出声的就走了。
OK， 不是这个课好像他 invited 11 students 吧，好像。
一共有10个人在上课，一共有10个引肉了。
但是他们今天都不在，没关系，他们肯定下次会来的吧。因为我们没有很多就是选择性课程，
对，我们没有课，我没有其他选的。
对啊，我只能选这些课。
对。
他自己讲。
哎，这个课，它前面是这个全是理论性的东西，我比较喜欢就是能把这个东西能应用到这个上课当中的这种的。
对。
他可能他说了，他说前面这些都比较枯燥，
那你担心这个作业吗？
哎，我要了解他，知道这个东西里面是什么，该怎么做就行了。之前你知道有个课就是就是你上过 Helen 的课了吗？
哪个？
就是 Understanding Research 那课，那个之前就是要做那个 survey 嘛，然后从 survey 里面进行分析嘛。我当时都不知道，我觉得那个好难啊，但是慢慢就知道怎么做了。OK， 老师。
对。
Okay. I'm not sure what's happening here. Okay, where did I get up to this time?
To ethnology.
Okay, epistemology?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there.
Oh, my. 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sending those emails when I go offline. So
yeah. I just want to let you know as fast as possible.
Yes. Okay, so we were still on this page.
Yep.
Good.
The first one. Yeah. Learn. Yeah. Objectivism.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we're looking at ontology. So we'd moved on to epistemology, had we?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So from an epistemological perspective, in terms of how the learning process occurs, from an objectivist perspective, learning is taking the knowledge from the teacher and recreating that in the mind of the student. So very much a direct transmission sort of approach. And that influences our research. Of course, there we would then be aiming to measure how effectively students have understood and have the same understanding as the teacher or what the teacher was teaching. That's quite different, though, from an idealist or rationalist perspective, where knowledge is developed through an experiential process. And what students learn could be very different to what the teacher knows. Of course, it's all going to be based and shaped on their past experiences, and those experiences were very different to the past experiences of the teacher. So even though the students have gone through a learning process guided by their teacher, their understanding may be very different to the teachers. And so from a research perspective then, it's much more involved in finding out the student's understanding and how it has changed, not in benchmarking that against the teacher's understanding. So a different approach to research and epistemology. Yep. Where are we? From a relativist perspective, things are either true or false. You either learnt something correctly or you've learnt it incorrectly. There's not your own perspective on what you've learnt. There's actual set things that you learn and they're right or wrong. And from a research perspective, again, we want to then measure those learning outcomes and whether or not they've been achieved or not achieved. And it's not whether or not the student has come up with their own new learning outcome or different interpretation of the learning. It's whether or not they've actually learned what they were meaning to learn, or in this case. And a pragmatist is a whole lot of other approaches. And here we really need to look at a lot of the aspects here are around the motivations around the learning process, and what the student wanted to learn, and whether or not what they learnt is then going to be beneficial to them in the future, and whether or not they value that and see meaning in that learning. But the main thing is just to realize that there can be a whole range of different approaches depending upon your worldviews. And not everyone has the same. So when you read research, it may be reading it from your perspective when it was written from a very different perspective. And understanding that will allow you then to engage with that material much more than if you thought all perspectives were the same as your own. So I'll ask you the hard question: which perspective do you have in terms of ontology or epistemology?
Mine is the last one.
Okay, yep. As a pragmatist?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I support this one because I still think the world is changing every day, every year, and we have to use different points of view to think about the world, and to think about the educational development, especially students' learning. We cannot use the same point of view to think the students will learn
yes,
just like as before. Yeah, that's what I mean.
And one aspect of a pragmatist is they will often use a mix of quantitative and qualitative approaches, where, say, in particular, a relativist they tend to only like experimental quantitative research, which gives an absolute, or as much as we can ever achieve, a sort of a mathematically verified outcome of research processes, whereby a pragmatist is not constrained by that desire to any real extent. Okay, and Sarah, did you have one that you wanted to lay claim to?
No.
Okay, no problems at all. Okay, so that's one aspect of, well, that's the main aspect of this paper. Just making it clear that there is a whole range of different perspectives that you can engage with, different research methods. And then it goes through and looks at those particular methods, like a case study, and how different approaches would explore case studies in different ways. But this is useful in it breaks down case studies into three main categories. Often new researchers don't necessarily understand that there can be a whole lot of nuances in the main methodologies. And case studies in particular are very common, but they can have different ways of doing case studies. You can do an explanatory approach to a case study, an exploratory approach, or a descriptive approach. Descriptive approaches are probably the most common, but there are other ways of using case studies other than just that. And almost all of the major methodologies have a whole lot of nuances as different researchers come up with different ways of using the methods and different outcomes that can be achieved from those methods. Okay, moving down quickly so we can get to the last one. Okay, that's enough from that one. And our, well, that's not the one. Our final paper is a specific one. Whoops. Looking at the Delfy method, or the Delfy technique, and how it is used in educational technology research. Now, we're going to use a slight variation on the Delfy technique in your assignment because of some new tools that allow us to do a little bit easier, but it's still a useful thing to learn about the Delpy technique because it's so common in research. Now, the initial purposes of the Delpy technique were done during the Cold War, where they wanted to, lots of people had different opinions on what needed to be done about different approaches. And a particular organization called the RAND organization, which is part of the United States Department of Defense, was set up to try to look at everyone's ideas and work out a consensus of what the best approach was done. Of course, there were lots of people putting forward ideas, but it wasn't clear which was the way to go. And the Delpy technique was developed to get lots and lots of ideas from lots of experts and go through a rigorous approach to identifying what the most likely approach to solving a problem or doing something should be. So it's a little bit like groupthink, or well, I shouldn't say groupthink, that's sort of a negative, but when you have a whole group of people, and the opinion of thousands of people can sometimes be much better than an individual's opinion. It's not always the case in reality. The whole idea of groupthink and mobthink can be problematic because once you get to a certain critical mass, they can start influencing each other. And you don't want to then just have everyone go along with the majority view because it's the majority view. And the Delpy technique was designed to try to stop that happening. There was also the problem of certain strong personalities directing everyone else's opinion, where you had some people that were just really good at putting forward their views and getting everyone to agree with them, even though that view may not have been the best possible view. So the Delpy technique was designed to try to avoid those two problems. And that's why it's done through a blind process where everyone puts forward their ideas and then they all vote on those ideas, and everyone then sees the outcomes of those votes. They then refine their ideas and put forward new ideas, and everyone votes on that again, but without knowing who put forward the idea. And the idea is then so that everyone looks at all the ideas and they're not biased around particular experts or particular people that they know have had good ideas in the past and all those other things, and they can make a informed decision. So it's not just the difference between this and a survey is there's no discussion as part of the process. Here people can actually question things and have a discussion about things before the next round of ranking, and that's an important aspect because otherwise it'd just be here's a survey, rank these and look at the results. Okay, so a few aspects. If the problem that you're trying to solve could be done better in other techniques, then this may not be the best approach to use. So the Delpy technique is particularly useful when you can't use another approach that will determine things more accurately. Delpy techniques are used generally when, and consensus techniques as a set, are used when there's a whole range of possibilities. If there was one particular approach that should be done, then you'd probably use other research methods, such as an experimental method, that would work out that approach is the most effective. So Delpy techniques are very often used in marketing and in education, where there's so many variables that we can't use other more statistically valid approaches, such as the experimental method or quasi-experimental methods and so forth. Okay, it needs to have okay, so it needs to be somewhat blind. That's what this second point's saying, so that people can put forward their ideas without being influenced overtly by the perceived experts in the group. And there needs to be some heterogeneity of the participants. So they need to have like some relationship to the problem. So say if they, in our case, we're looking at educational technologies, if they've got some interest in educational technologies or in improving education, things of that nature. Okay, so that's sort of a bit of a summary of the Delphi technique as an idea. The process, okay, a couple of different processes here. Let's choose this one. Here, you develop your initial question. So it may be, what's the best educational technologies to use in a school? You select your experts. You give them a questionnaire, which will be a series of questions related to that initial question. Sometimes you actually go through a process where you get the experts to help develop the questions. We won't be doing that in this particular case. You collect the responses to those first round of questions. You give everyone feedback on what those responses were. And you then work through a process of coming up with a second set of questions, informed by the responses from the first set. You then have everyone vote on those again, and then you analyze results, and you distribute the results and publish from that. So it's a fairly simple process, but a very effective one for complex questions. Sometimes they'll have 3 rounds. This one says they often do. More often they only have 2 rounds, but 3 rounds can be more useful. Panel selection is just identifying your experts. What else?
So for our assignment, we don't need to find experts, just
no, your panelists don't need to be experts. So I understand that can be difficult for many of you. If you do have access to experts, that's wonderful. But because your questions will generally relate to something to do with education, many of you will know a number of education students or people involved in education. But worst case, just get your friends or family, anyone that's had some knowledge of and interest in education and could answer your questions will be fine. I'm not really expecting you to come up with super fantastic results that we're going to publish and have changed the world. It's much more about you learning the process and being involved in a research process. And the better the process, though, the better you'll be able to develop up your second assignment. So there is some benefit for finding some good experts and getting some really good ideas. So then you don't have to come up with all the ideas for your second assignment. But it's not a mandatory aspect of it. You can use just everyday people as part of your research process. Okay, there are limitations to the Delphi process, as there are for any research process, but there are ways of helping address those. This sort of summarizes them here. There's often a move towards simplification, where we try to make things really simple instead of understanding the complexity of the real world. It gives sometimes an illusion of expertise where, well, say, for example, that the results of yours, you're going to have a whole lot of, not necessarily experts, but by looking at the results, we may perceive it as though having been done by experts. So it'll give the illusion of it being a much more rigorous result than it may be. And that may not be evident in the actual analysis and presentation of the results. That's why the selection of the panelists is an important part of a real Delphi survey. Of course, if you do just take fairly uninformed people, then you'll only get fairly uninformed results as a result. Sometimes they're done sloppily in terms of the research. Very often they're oversold. You come up with some good results and you say, yes, the experts have determined that tablet computers are going to be the way things are going to go in the future, and all students will be using them, and they're going to revolutionize education, without highlighting the limitations of any research process, including Delphi consensus making processes. This can put forward ideas that can help guide progress, but it's not going to give definitive results. This type of research won't provide the absolute evidence that a particular approach should be done. If you want to achieve that, then you need to go to things such as a true experimental method with blind groups and go through that whole rigorous approach. And sometimes it can be deceptive. Sometimes people write research and they want to make it really, really popular and get lots of people reading their research, and they fudge the results and don't put forward what actually has happened. Okay, so that's our readings for this week. Let me just get back to the video. The whole point of these is to refamiliarize you with educational research and how the particular context is for this course around educational technologies, and how we can approach our understanding of educational technologies through a whole range of research approaches, and many of which you're familiar with, some of which may be new to you this evening. Now, next week, we're going to look at a particular set of tools and around what's called systems analysis and systems theory. And there'll be some very specific little approaches, particularly around simulation, but also around causal effects and causal flow diagrams. And we use this to try to understand the complexity of an educational environment and all the different influences on that educational environment. And you're going to create some models of an educational environment and then look at some of the techniques we can use to try to understand how those influencing factors are interacting with each other. Okay. Yep. Do we have any other questions?
No questions right now, but I think I will have questions when we have a summit.
No problems at all. And don't get too worried about your assignment just yet. We are going to go through a run through of it in class or during a week in week 3. And that'll give you a bit more of an idea. And during the run through, you're going to be the participants in a consensus study. Okay. So that'll give you an understanding of what's involved before you make your own.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, we might wrap things up then if there's no further questions.
Not at the moment.
No.
Okay. And I'll set up the discussion forum where you can post questions during the week. And look forward to seeing you again next week.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Looking forward to see you next week. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.